The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Julian, before we started with the show today, I just wanted to begin with a couple words about Jessi Pierce and her family. I'm sure most of our listeners have heard the story by now, but a real tragedy over the weekend with her and her 3 kids dying in a house fire in Minnesota. And you know, this is the kind of tragedy that, frankly, there's no words for if you heard about it from someone you didn't know. But in this case, you know, Jessi's someone that had a lot of friends in the hockey community, really was a positive ray of light in an industry where it's tough to be so, you know, authentically herself, and someone that I didn't know too well personally, but felt like you knew her just because of how she shared her life and the way she went about doing her job. So, you know, really not much sense you can make of something like this, but really I wanted to at least start off by acknowledging the loss that the Wild have gone through here, our friends in Minnesota, you know, the great state of hockey, where Jessi, you know, had a huge impact. And then obviously her family, you know, grappling down with the kind of tragedy no one would want to find ever in their life. So, our thoughts are with them, and, you know, I guess we're going to talk about hockey because it was quite clear that's other than her family, that was the thing Jessi loved most.
CJ, that's very well said. On behalf of not just us, but everyone at the SDPN, we offer our most sincere condolences to the rest of the family and the Minnesota hockey community. A really terrible tragedy. No easy way to transition into topics today, but we will do that. And we will start with the Edmonton Oilers. A lot to discern and to dissect over when it comes to Connor McDavid and some comments he made post-game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was asked about I'll just go over this quote here from Connor McDavid, where he talks about the Tampa Bay Lightning. And some people kind of went into it a little bit, and I'm very curious for your thoughts, CJ. I'll just read what's been out there from Connor on the Tampa Bay Lightning. They got a great system. They're perfectly coached. They all know what they're doing all over the ice. It's impressive. They are a great team. They're extremely well coached. They're extremely well organized. They're very, very rehearsed in everything that they do. It's very impressive. And when you do break them down, they have got a heck of a goalie to backstop them. Look, general praise for John Cooper and the Tampa Bay Lightning on the surface. We get it. They're a really good team. It's been that way for a while. But it's hard not to read between the lines when you consider what's been done with the Edmonton Oilers to be a contending team and Connor McDavid's situation. Are we wrong to kind of make that jump when it comes to those comments from Connor McDavid?
It's my view some people have made the leap a little too firmly. You know, I certainly think the one thing that's happened in Edmonton this year is there's a lot of frustration. And things haven't gone the way anyone wanted. And that includes for Connor McDavid. And that was a frustrating loss. I caught that game Saturday night. You know, the Lightning, you know, lost some players to injury, had them come back. They each scored. I mean, it was a typical Lightning game. They stuck up for one another. It was pretty physical, a few fights and the like. But they were fairly dominant in securing the 2 points on the road to Edmonton. And you know, the Oilers, like everyone else in the Pacific Division, have not been winning too much lately. And obviously there's a lot of stress there. And so let's not forget, Connor McDavid just played for John Cooper at the Olympics. You know, he just got finished being part of a game where the other team kind of soundly beat his team. And, you know, I just think a lot of frustration came out there. Now, you know, is he calling out his coach? I don't personally think that. I see it more as just a general, the Oilers are not where they want to be kind of comment. You know, it's easy to make that leap. And look, we'll see. I'm sure Connor McDavid's going to be asked about this earlier this week. He's going to probably have to clarify in some way, shape, or form what he meant. But to me, that isn't a guy calling out his coach. It just, he's not feeling great about where his team is at this point. And I you know, remember just before the Olympic break, Leon Draisaitl called out this group too. They lost a game in Calgary. And I see it as an extension of those talks. Like, I don't think Connor McDavid's looking around and going, this is on Chris Knobloch. I think he's looking around, you know, not feeling great necessarily on every given night about where the team is at. And I think everyone shares in that frustration. I mean, the one thing that I think has made the Oilers a good team, a great team in the last few years is I think they're good at having the honest conversation. I think they are pretty real when it comes to this stuff. And so, you know, this to me is not a guy trying to get his coach fired or anything like that. But I've obviously seen a lot of people jump into that conclusion, and you know, I can see why you would, but I think you can't remove a couple quotes from generally everything going on around the Oilers right now.
So when you hear Connor McDavid, I believe the next question that was asked to him was, what can be done for Edmonton to reach the level that Tampa's at? And Connor's like, that's a coaching question. You can ask Chris Knobloch that question. What does that make you think about, if you're not going to think it's Connor McDavid calling out his coach, what does that make you think about where this team is at? And that could get into a whole other discussion about what the Pacific Division as a whole looks like.
Well, when I watched that scrum, I took that as him saying, like, it's not my job to coach the team. Not in the sense that, like, go talk to that guy who isn't doing his job. I think it's more like, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, he's the superstar player. He wears the C, all those things that Connor McDavid is, but it's not his job to actually get that answer. And frankly, probably doesn't have that answer. You know, the other thing too, like John Cooper is not just some coach, right? John Cooper has like a case to be considered among the all-time greats in the NHL. And he's by far the longest tenure coach in the league right now. He's coaching Team Canada, you know, has 2 Stanley Cups and all the things he does on his resume. I mean, to say that you're aspiring to have a team that looks like his team, like, to me, that's a compliment. It's the same way every other team might say of a good player, hey, he got, you know, we went up against the Oilers tonight and Connor McDavid outplayed him. Like, he's like, that's where we want to get to, kind of thing. Like, I think it's funny how we, like, in today's world, we really take these like snippets and, you know, take a sentence and write a book about it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's
subtext.
Yeah, but let's look at the other side of this. Connor McDavid obviously has a long history with Chris Knobloch. A lot of people's impression, even though it's always been my understanding, it's not like he actually handpicked him to be hired, but a lot of people have that view. You know, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to think that this is what's going on. And honestly, I think if he would have other ways if he wanted to raise issues with his coach to do it. I really do believe it's a case of right after the game, emotions, and you know, the Oilers getting awfully close to the playoffs time and not looking anywhere like the kind of team that could go on a long playoff run that probably has him more down than thinking this is all a coaching issue right now.
Speaking of Leon Draisaitl, who we mentioned a couple moments ago, he is in Germany getting treated for a lower body injury that has him sidelined for the rest of the regular season. He spoke to media in Germany about it. Word on the street is he is meeting with the famed doctor known as Healing Hans. That's Dr. Hans Wilhelm Muller-Wolfhard, who has treated so many different celebrities. When I mean celebrities, I don't just mean athletes. I mean, he's treated Luciano Pavarotti and Bono, in addition to Kobe Bryant, Usain Bolt, Ronaldo, Austin Matthews. Getting into NHL players, Austin Matthews and Max Pacioretty are players who come to mind who have sought Healing Hans's services. What do you think of this latest development when it comes to one Leon Draisaitl?
Well, it's interesting that he's, you know, in Germany and speaking to reporters and, you know, at the soccer match and everything. But, you know, to me, it doesn't raise much actual alarm. I mean, just because it's so common for athletes to seek treatment from this guy. And, you know, we already had the expectation Leon Draisaitl has been placed on LTIR. You know, the Oilers have said he's not back before the end of the regular season. And he's German. So the fact he ended up back in Germany during this time where he wasn't expected to be playing and he is, you know, rehabbing an injury and seeing one of the world's top sports doctors, that doesn't make me worried. Now, I do understand he did the interview in German and there was a translation where it made it sound like if we go long enough, you know, something to that effect, you know, hopefully I'll be back. You know, the Oilers still think he's playing the start of the playoffs. And I would be stunned if he wasn't, quite honestly. I mean, seems as though he's dealing with a knee issue. It's obviously not severe enough that he's, you know, getting surgery or anything like that. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward injury that a lot of players get. I'm not saying it won't be something that he feels a little bit maybe when he gets back on the ice. But, he's only in Germany until Tuesday of this week. And he, said that he's going to be back in Edmonton after that point. So, really it's an opportunity to go there and get treatment from, healing Hans, as you mentioned. Now, a lot of what he does is kind of secretive. He's not been too open about exactly the nature of what he does with these athletes. There are some stories about him. I remember looking into this big time last year, actually, when Matthews went over to Germany in the middle of the season, and it became a little bit of a to-do that all got out publicly because the Leafs had been calling him day to day at the time, and all of a sudden he's over in Germany and everyone's like, what's going on? But I do think that this is sort of regular course stuff. He's elite. He's obviously elite at what he does. I mean, if Leon Draisaitl and Austin Matthews, both in the middle of hockey seasons that we know of, and probably other players too. I think Matthew Tkachuk might have seen him as well, but they're flying over there in the middle of the season for a couple of days to get treatment. I think it tells you, about the belief and effectiveness of his work. So, I actually believe this could be a silver lining for the Oilers. You don't want injured players, but given the demands on everyone this season, having someone like Leon Draisaitl have this time where he's not playing these games down the stretch. Now, I'm saying that on the assumption they're going to get enough points. They're going to qualify for the playoffs. They're going to, in fact, play long enough for him to get back in the lineup. But if that happens, I don't see this as necessarily a negative thing because it doesn't sound like it's a severe injury. It's something that, is taking him out here for a month or so. But, we've seen Sidney Crosby come back, for example, off the knee injury he had at the Olympics. I think he's got 4 points in 3 games. Jumping right back into playoff type games with the Penguins after that layoff. I just think that the condition the athletes are in, someone like Draisaitl, I would expect him to be good right away, rejoining that Oilers lineup. So they're kind of grinning and bearing without him right now because, you can see it. Like McDavid feels like the way it looks on the ice, it looks like he feels like he has to do it on his own sometimes. When Draisaitl, I think especially, is not part of that team, and naturally so. When he doesn't get points, the Oilers don't win, and when he gets points, they win. I mean, it's actually that simple. And so, I don't think this last stretch is going to be easy for his teammates, but him being over in Germany getting that treatment, as I say, we might look back on that in the first round, and he shot out of a cannon. We're like, oh wow, that was actually kind of fortuitous the way everything worked out. Yeah,
he's healed.
He's healed and he's rested. I mean, I don't think anybody's rested in the league right now. I mean, the schedule is bananas. Everyone signed up for this as just part of having the compression with the Olympics and everything else. But, most teams are playing every other night in March and into April. And then, of course, that's what the playoffs is for the teams that play longest. So, it's a real grind. I saw the Hurricanes in Toronto on Friday and just had a couple casual conversations with players, and they were mentioning, feeling the weight of their schedule sort of piling up. They've kind of have had a weird one. They were like in Canada to play the Leafs, and they went to Pittsburgh where they played on Sunday, then they're back playing Montreal, like crossing the border a bunch. But yeah, I think it just is what it is. I mean, I bet we could go through every individual team and be like, that doesn't look pleasant because, it's feeling, the games are so big for the team still in it. And there's so many games. Like I just say, you are feeling the weight of everything right now. That's a sense I have around the league for the team still in it. And there's obviously a lot of teams still in these playoff races.
Hey, CJ, you know what else doesn't look so pleasant? The Pacific Division. Yeah, I thought about that way too long. Anyway, the Oilers, as we're recording, 3 points off the division lead. Like, in any other year, we'd be talking about how fun the Pacific Division race looks because the Ducks are in first. The Oilers are fighting for first, obviously. The Golden Knights aren't too far behind. But look at these point totals, man. 80 points for the Ducks. They have a -8 goal differential. Only 2 teams in the Pacific Division, as of this recording, have a positive goal differential. That's Edmonton and Vegas. If we were to do a 1-16 playoff format in the league right now, only one team from the Pacific Division would be in that 1-16, and it's the Anaheim Ducks at 80 points, 14th best record, with the Oilers and the Golden Knights obviously out of the playoff picture in a 1-16 scenario that we know would never happen because there's nothing wrong with the current playoff format.
And aren't the Ducks like 8-0 in a shootout, I think, last I saw?
Like,
so I'm just saying, I mean, that's
get
obviously
your points that way, I guess.
But I mean, yeah, it's a tough look, honestly. I mean, that was the more interesting quote for me is the pillow fight comment from McDavid saying that that's what the Pacific Division is. I mean, a real point of honesty there. But you look at the Oilers and the Golden Knights, are probably the two teams that had the highest expectations, I'd say, in the Pacific. It just feels like neither of them win at all these days. You know, you have a team like LA still hanging around. Obviously, they've been a playoff team perennially the last number of years. Made the Panarin trade. There's pressure on them to get in. You know, Anaheim's been a nice story. They've climbed up after, you know, being in the wilderness for a while and are on the position of, you know, where they can qualify. But yeah, it's. I mean, even San Jose's lost 4 games in a row at this point, and they've kind of, you know, they're still on the fringes there. If they turn around and win 4 or 5 in a row, they're probably, you know, potentially getting into a spot. But yeah, it's a little tough in the West, and you know, specifically to the Pacific. Like, I don't recall a division being this weak. I mean, they went 0-6 collectively on Saturday in games, and I think, was it Thursday? They might have been 1-5 or something. Anyway, it just feels like no one wins ever, which, you know, and one of those teams is going to the conference final most likely. That's the other side of it. I don't know how many other ways I can criticize the playoff format. I feel like that's like twice a week on the CJ show. Tune in to see CJ bitch and moan about the playoff format. But I'm with, like, I do think it's on the point of like it's lunacy that it's not being addressed or tweaked or changed in some way.
2 questions. One, is the word bitch enough to have the explicit rating on a podcast?
Well, you've just said it, so I mean, we'll find out.
Only because you just said it.
Oh, I said it. Damn.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
What about damn?
Like,
you
said
just,
it. Yes,
the swears are flowing.
Okay, well, if we have to be at that point, then yes. Okay, it is definitely enough for the E. I guess just anyway. The second thing is, I guess the biggest thing I'm surprised about with this division is Edmonton. We know what they're like coming out of the West. They've been in the Cup final the last 2 years. Vegas, they add Mitch Marner. We look at them as a team that's trying to maximize its Cup contending window. Los Angeles has been in the playoffs the last handful of years, and if it weren't for the Edmonton Oilers, maybe we look at them a little bit differently. Anaheim made waves throughout this season with how they were this upstart team, and they were being coached by Joel Quenneville. And by the way, not that you need any validation, but you are right. They are a perfect 8-0 in the shootout this year. I'm just surprised at the fact that there was all this attention around some of these teams at the top part of the Pacific Division, and they still look this bad compared to everyone else. Like, that's what's mind-boggling to me, just to see these teams in the spot that they're in right now, that we would otherwise look at them as quality teams in their division. Maybe less so with Anaheim entering the year with the expectations placed on them, but Edmonton and Vegas should not be this low.
Well, and we're deep enough into the season that it's way more than fair to be like, well, maybe they just aren't that good. You know what I mean? Like,
I guess,
maybe they won't figure it out because history is not littered with teams that stumble in and go on a long run. Now, it does happen. Weird things also happen in Olympic years in the playoffs. So, you know, I'm not making predictions at this point. Certainly not at, Sunday night, March 22nd. I'm not saying Edmonton can't go on a run because I actually think they can just because of the playoff format. I mean, I would pick them head to head against any of the teams in the Pacific. Like, that would be my instinct going into a series. Obviously Vegas would be a close one, but Edmonton did beat the Golden Knights last year in the playoffs. The Golden Knights have 2 fundamental issues. They're not scoring enough goals, which was an issue last year. That was part of, the decision partly what was behind the decision to go get a player like Mitch Marner. And they're not getting very good goaltending of late, and that's really held them back. So to me, even though the Oilers are an imperfect squad, I like their odds in a series where the other team isn't getting saves and not scoring enough. Like, it feels actually like the kind of matchup that they would thrive in. Anaheim, I'm not convinced.
Too young, right?
LA, it's just a perennial loss. It feels like they play Edmonton. Like, the point is, I still probably would have Edmonton favored head to head against any of these teams, but they also have to finish in the top 3 in the Pacific for that to be relevant. If they finish, let's say they fell to wild card 2 and they're playing Colorado or Dallas in round 1. Well, that's a different equation. The Oilers are starting on the road and they're starting with nobody picking them in round 1. I can tell you that right now. So it's a strange year, and the Golden Knights as well. Like, it's funny. I was watching Thursday night, both Chris Knobloch, actually, that was the Oilers played the Panthers Thursday, lost 4-0. Chris Knobloch got some very spicy questions from the local media. That was not a loss that sat well on the narrative side, just with Florida having knocked them out in the Cup final back-to-back years, and made some comments about guys like Leon Draisaitl, during the Olympics and the bridesmaid thing. And, I'm just saying, like, they were getting a lot of questions about where was the emotion in that game, essentially. But also Bruce Cassidy, like, there was frustration in his voice that night too, with the Golden Knights having another loss. Now, they played a lot better in Nashville on Saturday afternoon. They lost that game, but from a process standpoint, they dominated the shots clock and probably did a lot more, I think, that they could feel good about. But it's a tough sled right now. Someone in the Pacific Division is probably going to the conference final. And, as you mentioned, in a 1-16 format, only one team would even be in the playoffs. I mean,
it's tough sled.
Here's the thing. My issue with the playoff format wouldn't be really solved by this. I mean, I just kind of want a 1-8 conference thing. I think is probably the most reasonable tweak. And so I don't know that really, you're still going to have bad divisions in a 1-8 conference year. And so I don't know that it solves the problem. This is just one extra thing on top of the fact you have 3 teams at the top of the Central Division that could be the best 3 teams in the league in the season.
And one of those mighty powers will be out by round 1. It's a travesty.
Right. And one team will come out of that and get to the conference final, but having played most likely 2 of the other best teams in the league, it might not have any juice left. It's a bizarre
But CJ,
thing.
there's nothing wrong with the playoff format. Everything is fine. It's great.
The league, I got to say this, the league and it's earned, I'm not backtracking anything I've said, but they must be feeling really under the gun because they're getting hit on the playoff format. I think totally fairly, it's a relevant conversation. The playoffs start in 3-4 weeks here and everyone's looking at the standings going, this doesn't make sense. And then, you've got the goalie interference thing, which it just feels like every day there's another play. Or
did you see what happened in Pittsburgh the other night? The Winnipeg-Pittsburgh game where there was that Morgan Barron goal that was allowed to count. And then members of Pittsburgh media were given the ruling on goaltender interference printed out. That is insane where we're at right now, where teams are going out of their way to be like, hey, it's written in black and white. This is what the rule is supposed to be. Tell me you don't know what goaltender, we're at a point now where we genuinely cannot explain goaltender interference. We have to just be like, if you see it, maybe it is. I don't know. We're at a point where no one explain to me goaltender interference.
Well, it shouldn't be that hard.
It shouldn't be that hard, but you can't do it.
If you go in to the crease on your own power and disrupt the goalie's ability to make a save, it shouldn't count as a goal.
Right, but that's very basic. But I can point to different calls where I've seen that exact thing happen, and those goals still counted anyway.
Right, that's where the Ottawa Anaheim the week before lost me, and obviously Pat Verbeek, the Ducks GM, was pretty animated about that at the GM's meeting with trying to get clarity there. So there's definitely, and look, Pittsburgh is one of the teams that can't figure this out. They are 0 for 8 now on goaltender interference challenges this season.
That is insane.
Which in addition to the fact that they're obviously working to understand it. They're not just guessing. They're, putting a finger up me okay, the wind's blowing towards challenge. No, they are working actively to figure it out, and they're getting it wrong every time, and they're getting slapped with a penalty on the other side of it. You can understand the frustration. That's how you get to a point where all of a sudden everyone's getting a copy of the rule after a sort of controversial ruling. I think it's a underrated play because it's a way to get us all talking about it with no one getting fined, right? No one had to come out from the Penguins organization and swear a whole bunch or, question the ability of the Situation Room folks. I mean, it's a subtle way, or not so subtle really, but kind of a subtle way to make your point and to get people talking about what happened and what didn't happen without anyone having to get in front of a microphone and get a $200K fine or whatever. as we've seen over the years.
I did not process the idea that was actually a genius way to go about that. I wonder if more teams start doing that.
I'll say this. Forward. I don't know who ordered that, but if it wasn't Kyle Dubas, I'd be shocked. Like, I don't know that. But I don't think the PR department, as friendly and helpful as they are, I don't think that they on their own went to the rule book, printed out the rule, and highlighted the specific passage and then handed it out. That order comes from above them. And my strong suspicion would be it's the person at the head of their hockey department, which is Kyle. And you know, he's spoken on this topic before, like pretty eloquently. He said that they're confused and that he mentioned a whole string of incidents. Like it's clear they're one of the teams that aren't happy, but it's not just the Penguins. And I think, you know, when we get this late in the regular season, the reason this conversation takes on a little more urgency is we can all imagine a big game in round 1 or round 2, or heaven forbid, game 7 of the Cup final or something where a play like this decides a game and that really, really, really matters. And these games do matter. Don't get me wrong. You know, as it turns out, Pittsburgh did get the win on Saturday afternoon over Winnipeg. So even if that call went against them, it didn't change where they were in the standings or anything like that. But it feels like to me that this is even more than offside challenges, which I don't generally like, but I think the goalie interference thing could give us our biggest moment of controversy or expected controversy come playoff time.
By the way, to finish the thought you were going to go on about the NHL being under fire, you were making the point about how we've been talking about the playoff format, we've been talking about goaltender interference, and I'm pretty sure you're going to make some subtle mention of how they have been assessing or dealing with suspendable calls, essentially a look at the Department of Player Safety. Obviously, people looking at the dangerous hit from Aj Greer on Connor Zary. There is a chance by the time you get this podcast, you'll know the ruling on that. But to see people discuss that play over the weekend, and for that play to only get a phone hearing, a lot of people were very upset about that. I'd love to know your thoughts. Is that something that was solely justified for just a phone hearing? And what did you think of the play?
Well, I mean, look, it's a completely dangerous play. I mean, Zary in that instance is defenseless, and you know, Aj Greer is trailing him, looking at his numbers, and pushes him right in his numbers, like shoves him in the back about 3 to 5 feet or whatever it was from the boards, and sends him head first into the boards. I mean, I don't mean to make any light of this. It's the kind of play that leads to people getting paralyzed or having a real serious neck or back issue stemming directly from it. And it's just a needless spot to throw it on the ice. I should mention, it was in the third period, less than 10 minutes left in a game the Panthers were losing. Like, it's just a needless hit, from game situation to decision made to, the fact that Zary did leave the game with an injury. It doesn't sound like it's too serious, but it lines up again where had they elected to go with an in-person hearing and suspend for 6 or more games, I think they would have been totally justified in doing so. I felt that they were light on the Gudas Matthews hit. I think this hit was worse. It's a little different because part of the discussion around Gudas is just how many times he's been suspended prior to this, whereas Aj Greer, I believe, only had the one game suspension on his resume prior to this incident. So not in the same sort of level of repeat offender category. And the injury isn't as bad, even though Zary's, going to miss, a game, like he's going to miss some time. It's not, Matthews had to go undergo MCL surgery and would have missed basically the playoffs, or a huge chunk of them had the Leafs been in the playoffs. So, those are two different dynamics there. Either way, in both cases, I think there was an ability to go longer for player safety. And it comes at a time where, you had Matthews' agent, Judd Moldaver, speak out. You had Connor McDavid speak out. You even had Sidney Crosby. I wouldn't say it was speaking out, but he, did say that there's inconsistencies in the rulings and that he's a bit confused. He mentioned that Malkin recently, his teammate, obviously got a 5-game suspension. And then he saw the Gudas Matthews play and seemed like he was inferring that he was surprised that would be viewed with the same level of punishment. It's a big talking point in the league. And I feel like the more high profile or incidents like this, like it's not going to take any heat off. And so it was there for them to suspend longer, but they're digging in and they're doing what they think is right. I mean, this is what I'll say. I have nothing against the Department of Player Safety personally. I do believe them that they're working hard. And I know a lot of the people and respect a lot of the people that work in that department, quite frankly. Any of my comments it's not like personal in nature. It's more maybe the standard itself needs an adjustment. If this is what this actual standard is, that's kind of where I land is, I don't think that they're I know there's all these conspiracy theories about which team things happen for. I honestly don't buy that stuff myself. I do think that they tend to be lighter than I would like them to be on a lot of, especially big dangerous plays. And this was a big dangerous play. And when the phone hearing came down, I had a lot of interesting comments in my feed.
Be tougher on those dangerous hits as they happen and be consistent with these rulings. I think we can all agree, whether you're hockey media, whether you're a hockey fan, that's what we want from the Department of Player Safety. I don't see too many people disagreeing with that. And I'm pretty sure if you were to go to George Peros, I'm sure he himself would say, hey, that's a standard. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And I'll say this. I really think this conversation will continue in the summer. There's not a lot that there's going to be debates about every hit that results in supplemental discipline and all that online, from now through the end of the season. I don't think there's really action items, but, the NHL Players Association is going to have to get its sort of minds around, is Connor McDavid, because I know this really matters to McDavid. He believes fundamentally that, what he said, the process needs to be adjusted and changed and tweaked, needs to be upgraded. But, I think obviously the PA is, even as powerful as Connor McDavid's voice is and should be, they represent a wide swath of players. And I think they need to get a sense, is this an issue for others too? And if so, I really think by next year, we're going to see them having some conversation with the league about the change. Now, what that changes is too premature to say. I don't know if you go to a panel. I don't know if you can bring in third-party voices, exactly how that all will function. But I really think it's going to head there, because this isn't just like a group of people being mad about one incident. I feel like this is an accumulation over time of frustration that's built up, and I don't think those voices are going away, and I don't think we're going to ignore those voices, because when Connor McDavid has an opinion like this, lots of people listen.
Yep. The fact that players are starting to use their voice for this is noteworthy enough for me. And I think it's only a matter of time before somebody, whether it's a top 10 player in the league or someone below that, blows their top off on this and goes on a rant for the ages that everyone can get behind on those types of calls. I think it's underneath the surface. Someone is going to do it. Do
you know what's funny? I don't think he'll be the guy, but I'm very interested to see how Austin Matthews discusses this when he does speak to the media, because he hasn't spoken, since the hit happened with Gudas. Obviously, it was his agent that initially put out the statement, but I'm just curious if Austin, how forcefully, how strongly he goes in on this sort of stuff. We probably won't know till mid-April. I wouldn't think that he'll be in front of a microphone until the Leafs end of season availabilities, but there's going to be lots being talked about that day, but that's one element I go in just curious to see, how strongly he wants to get into this publicly, basically.
Not to continue on the Leafs, but just top of mind, Anthony Stolarz taking a puck to the throat in warm-up on Saturday. I don't know if there's been anything new on him, but that was a scary moment to see over the weekend, I thought.
It was scary. It was just precautionary for him, though. The fact that he was able to rejoin the team after the game, and to visit the hospital and fly home back to Toronto, I think is a good sign. And look, where the Leafs are, they don't need to push anything here. If, they've got other goaltenders they can call up if need be, but, the circumstances there aren't great. Friendly fire, essentially, right? It was a William Nylander shot in warm-up that got him high. Add it to the list. It feels like anytime we're talking about a Leafs topic the last few weeks, it's a bit of a calamity there right now. But I think that they avoided anything that we need to be super concerned about, but naturally, given the area of the body and the way that went down, they had to be careful and they had to be sure.
Some might argue the word calamity might be too nice to what the Leafs have gone through this year.
I left my thesaurus downstairs. So.
Yeah, we got to have more of these on
calamity.
Hand. Calamity.
I mean, they're the most disappointing team in the league. The team with the highest expectations that missed the mark by the most, I would argue. Even
with Mitch Marner being ripped out, just thinking of teams like the Winnipeg Jets, who were as good as they were last year. They're the President's Trophy team. Like, I know they're
Winnipeg's still on the fringes of the playoff race, and it's because the West is different. True. But like the Leafs are going to have, unless they reel off like a 6-game winning streak, they're going to have their largest ever year-over-year point decline in 110 years of a franchise. Like, and if you go back and look at the way they were talking about themselves last May, September, October, and training camp and into the season, like they were talking about themselves as cup contenders. And what are we doing now in this city? I mean, hardcore Leafs fans that are my buddies, they're all going to the Tankathon website and like doing simulations, hoping that the Leafs get a draft pick inside the top 5. So to end up where you could be in a top 5 when you were trying to be a cup contender, that like most teams don't have that, don't miss the mark to that degree. I mean, it's been that's why it's a calamity. That's why it's like, it's almost hard to put your mind. They've fallen so quickly and more unexpectedly than even they thought that it's hard to catch up to what it all means, I think, at times. And right now that's like, they can't wait to get through these games. Like it's a death march around that organization right now. Total death march. Like nobody's happy.
No.
And they're all like, they're weathering these various sort of controversies or, the discussion about the lack of a response or, just getting into every little thing that keeps going on here. And they're like, we still have 3 more weeks of this. Like there's no let up in sight. And, give the players like they've called a few guys up from the Marlies, Quillen and Grew. And, they're trying to inject some of that life, which I do think can be beneficial, but this year can't get over quick enough for the Leafs.
What do you think about how Craig Berube has been handling some of these post-game press conferences? Think of the other night where Easton Cowan is saying like, oh, I think that first goal that the Sens scored, it deflated us a little bit. And then Craig Berube is pushing back, be like, I don't know why would they be deflated? And just stuff like that where he seems like he's being a little bit more candid and honest and not like, being guarded. Like that sounds like a guy to me who, just as you said too, like he's ready for this season to be over. Like you kind of let your hair down in moments like that.
Yeah, and the Leafs got outshot by 30 shots in that game Saturday. But and the Senators, like, yeah. I think if you look at what Craig Berube said, like there's behind the scenes footage. I think it was in the Amazon show from last year in the playoffs when they're playing Florida. Like he thinks these guys that a lot of it's between the ears. Like he thinks that's the problem. Like that's his diagnosis as the head coach of this team for a year and 3/4, without question. And again, there's hot mic situations where you can see that he's saying that. He says it for sure. I think it's game 7. When they come in either the first or second intermission and he's like, guys, it's all between the ears. Like, what are you doing? Basically, like he seemed almost stunned at their effort, right? Like that they couldn't in that moment rise. Now, obviously that was his first time being around that team in that moment. Those that have, fans or those that have watched, understand the Leafs are kind of known for that. And so I wonder, that's how I read that comment about Easton Cowan. It's just like,
right.
What do you mean deflated? Like it's just always some excuse. Like you got to dig in and go to work. And Craig Berube, no different than his players, is frustrated and probably counting down the days and, has to be wondering about his own future. I don't know how that's all going to shake out, but I mean, naturally when you have a season that's this bad, everyone's talking about firing the GM and firing the head coach. And none of those decisions are going to be made most likely until after the last game, April 15th back in Ottawa. So, in the meantime, they've got like 3.5 weeks to kind of get through it. I'd love to know what everyone thought. I don't know if you saw, they did a fan day on March break, which I actually think is a great initiative, but it's a tough time.
I saw the highlights. Yeah.
It's a tough time for a team in the spot the Leafs are in. Although it might be even tougher. Let's say they're in the middle of a playoff race and you have that day, the day before a game, and you got dogs on the ice, and you're doing Simon Says on the blue line. And again, I'm honestly not making fun of them. I think it's good, and I think this organization has a long way to go to rebuild some bridges with its fans. And it makes sense to me that you're trying to appeal to the youngest people out there, because those are the sort of people that become 50 and 60 year fans and spend a lot of money on your product and help you, be the kind of franchise the Leafs have been. But the timing on doing that in March break at this point in the season, either when it's a lost season or even if that ended up being a big game they were preparing for, I mean, that might need to be relooked at. Anyway, I can only imagine how Craig Berube felt about all that too. So
I saw Max Doby. I don't think he meant anything malicious by it, but like he got asked about like the crowd. He said, "This is probably one of the loudest crowds they've had all year." I kind of laughed at that.
I'll tell you, I asked a couple people about that. I asked, like, did you think that was, was he getting a dig in? And this consensus was yes, that he was getting a dig in. That was,
I think he was.
Like, that it wasn't just a slip of the tongue. Like it didn't just come out the wrong way or whatever. So, yeah, I mean,
you know what? I changed my mind. I think he was.
Well, and there's definitely people out there that agree with you. So I wasn't sure. I wasn't in the building, right? Like I just saw it on social media, but the consensus was that he was getting a dig in at the crowd. I mean, why not? I guess add it to the list.
Okay, can I just get two quick things in before we get to ask CJ here? I don't know how much you paid attention yesterday, but that Islanders-Canadiens game, a bit of a barn burner, and Cole Caufield scoring 3 goals, gets 5 points in that game. A lot of talk around Cole Caufield with the season that he's having and the fact that he's been scoring goals on Saturday nights, but also the fact that he reaches the 40-goal plateau, which that hasn't happened in a while with the Montreal Canadiens. I think Vincent D'Anfous was the last one to do it. But just any general thoughts on the Canadiens and Cole Caufield, and that'll also spin into some talk about how this race for a playoff spot in the East has been too, because the Islanders are very much implicated in that. Yeah,
and Montreal needed the win too. I mean, they had the tough loss against Detroit, and it's getting tight for them, even though they've been kind of comfortably in a playoff spot. I'll call it comfortably, but you start to look at it, and you still got to take care of business here and get your wins to make sure you don't have a late season swoon that drops you out of that playoff picture. I mean, it's the most fun place to be in the playoff time. And I think the expectations are up a little bit in Montreal, right? Like they got in last year. That was a high wire act. If you remember, it went to like shootout last game of the season against Chicago, I want to say it was. But it was barely got in, but you get that under your belt. But now, I think that there's hope that they can go on some kind of run. And so Caufield having the season he has gives you hope. Nick Suzuki's got a chance to get to 100 points here, which would be pretty significant. Been a long time since a member of the Canadiens was hitting that mark. And so I think these are all signs that your organization is taking the climb you want it to, that you're having players individually in that position. Obviously the team on its way back to the playoff spot. So, the Islanders it was a tough week for them, a couple losses, but I mean, there's not many teams losing. Between Pittsburgh did lose on Sunday in Carolina, but between Pittsburgh, Columbus, the Islanders, even your Senators there in Ottawa, Julian, it's not many losses between those teams. I know there's the odd one mixed in, but
just look at it now. The Islanders knocking on the door of playoff contention. The Sens, temporarily, the Philadelphia Flyers were up on the Sens yesterday before the Sens beat the Leafs. Like that's how much it's been crazy with this race for playoff spots in the Eastern Conference.
Do you know what's going to be the end of this? By the way, that whole U.S. Thanksgiving rule is totally out the window.
Yeah, we don't have to do pretenders or contenders anymore.
No, but there's like 6 or 7 teams that have like totally flip-flopped since U.S. Thanksgiving. You got teams like Nashville, I think was in dead last in the league on U.S. Thanksgiving. Now they're in a playoff spot.
They've won 4 in a row as of today.
Obviously, Buffalo has made a big rally. Columbus has made a big rally since that point in time. So, us pronouncing that the 16 playoff teams are locked and loaded on like November 28th, those days are over, pal.
No, I think those days are done. I am in firm agreement with that. One other small thing I'll say too, I did not mention from that Canadiens Islanders game, a really great tribute by the Canadiens at the beginning of the game for Roger Brulotte, the longtime broadcaster who passed away this week. Our condolences are with him too. But I just wanted that mentioned as well because he is a legend in that city. It was a really nice man. I met him a couple of times, and some of my colleagues in Montreal have met him too. But yeah, really crazy game between the Islanders and the Canadiens. Just wanted that mentioned.
Didn't John Bartlett make a call that was kind of in homage to him?
Bonsoir. That was an incredible call by John Bartlett. That's probably one of the best, if not the best one I've ever heard him make.
Okay, I got to look it up. I just saw that he did that, but I actually haven't heard it yet. So, and I know,
yes,
I'm not familiar with. Is it Roger or Roger?
So it's Roger Brulotte, who was a longtime baseball announcer in Montreal. Obviously, when the Expos were a thing, and when the Blue Jays, obviously, they come to Montreal, they broadcast those games too. You may remember Vladimir Guerrero walking off a game in Montreal during exhibition play. There's a really famous French call where Roger Brulotte is able to add to that. And it just, again, a very terrific human being, unfortunately no longer with us, but really well done on the Canadiens to shout him out and pay tribute to him over the weekend. Thought that was really well done. So
the Canadiens don't miss on that stuff.
They never miss that stuff. So I'm glad that they were able to do great on that. Let's get to some questions for Ask CJ before we get you out of your siege. Just a few. One from Muskoka Matt, and we haven't checked in on this in a while.
Uh-oh.
Is the run streak still alive?
It is through March 22nd, still alive.
Hey, how many days?
I don't know. I'm a month. I'm a month and a week shy of 6 years, though.
Hey, congratulations.
Well, still got to get through the next 5.5, 6 weeks to get there, but it's been a challenge, but it's still going. I am exhausted, not sleeping nearly as much as normal, and having to run at kind of weird times depending on what works with baby schedule and work schedules and Lindsay and everything. But I mean, it's still going. That's all that matters. It's I kind of feel like every part of your life you have seasons of your life. There's times when you have more time and there's times when the weather's better. You can always make an excuse not to do it, I guess is my point. And the whole idea of running every single day is no matter what's going on, you get it done. And I'm still getting it done so far.
How's Low Man? How's Ryder doing?
He's doing awesome. We had a nice, he and I had a nice Saturday night watching the games in the living room. Let Lindsay go to bed early, split up the evening in shifts, but, watched the full slate, watched John Cooper on After Hours. So
he was great on After Hours, by the way.
He was very good. Yeah, no surprise there for John. And, it's kind of interesting. Like, we didn't talk about this, but with Doug Armstrong stepping aside as the GM for Team Canada, John Cooper's future as the head coach is a little bit up in the air because they're going to let the next GM make those decisions. It's not to say at all that John Cooper wouldn't be back, but it's a little less certain than, if you were bringing the whole band back, then he'd probably already know. And, he made a mention. He didn't get into that, but I don't know if you heard there was a between the lines comment about like the way he left Milan feeling and would love another shot at it. I'm sure a lot of the players feel the same way, right? I mean, deep down, Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon and Macklin Celebrini, all those guys who are going to be back for sure in 2030. I'm sure we're going to they'll take the downside of that last game against the US and try to channel it into better outcomes. So anyway, yeah, Ryder's doing great. I'm watching as much hockey as I can, and I'm lucky just to have a healthy baby boy.
Awesome. Next question from Charlie. This is actually directed towards me. Julian, by any chance, will you have a book signing of Black Aces in Atlantic Canada? And if you could choose one Black Ace from the past and back to play in the current NHL, who would it be?
Love it.
Jerome McGinley, final answer. PK Subban would probably be the next one, but I'll just say Jerome McGinley just to say him. And to anyone who listens to this podcast who has a bookstore or a venue of some sort in Atlantic Canada, and you want Black Aces there, you want me there, hit my line. I would love to come to Atlantic Canada and talk about the book and do that. We can make something happen as soon as the season ends.
Love it.
Let's do it. Next one from the big dog, Mitch Vosberg. That's a dope ass name. The big dog. The big dog. How do teams view the contract of Elias Pettersson as opposed to Elias Pettersson, the player? He was linked to Detroit for months and probably still is.
It's a lot of money, right? It's a lot of money in a lot of years. I think Elias Pettersson's age and how high his highs were as an NHL player have teams at least interested enough to want to give him that next chance, even though there is financial risk there. But, we can't ignore the fact that the contract is a bit of an albatross for a player whose, his value is just tanked. It's completely plummeted in the 2 years and a little bit since he signed that deal. So, unfortunately, the way it works in a salary cap world, now this is changing a little bit because with the cap ceiling jumping so much, I think teams have more flexibility than we're used to them having. But, a player is so often viewed through the value of his contract and his production just because it matters in the way the league works. I mean, if this was a league without a salary cap, you can pay someone a lot of money who isn't maybe performing and get away with it. But, it can't be the case in the NHL. So the contract is the biggest reason why I think he hasn't been traded yet from Vancouver. Because of that cap jumping, as I've said, he might become a more tradable asset over time. I think the Canucks are smart to hang on to him. Obviously their first hope is that he becomes an elite player again for them, and that we're not even saying they're smart because he's going to be traded. We're going to say he's smart because they weathered that storm, and here he is as a top player again. But, I don't think it's an immovable contract, but it's a very challenging contract.
Okay. Last one for you from Liam. Why do regimes, particularly front office regimes, often feel the need to use prior players? I think they're just referencing the fact if GMs go around and they're more likely to kind of find ways to acquire or sign guys that they may have had in previous stops around the league.
I think it's just human nature. You know what I mean? Like, people tend to like working with people that they know they can trust, that they've seen them in hard moments in the past. They what you're getting. I think it's easier to bet on the sure thing than throw caution to the wind. I think that's really all it comes down to. I mean, those can be lonely jobs. I think when you're the key decision maker in a front office, you have a lot of people looking at you each day. You obviously have a fan base that's counting on you to do what's best, but you're answering to an owner. Like, you're kind of a middle manager, but upper middle manager, and you're making decisions on human beings at the end of the day. Like, when you extend someone a contract who had 3 30-goal seasons the last 3 years, and he's coming to your team as a free agent, well, that's not a guarantee he's going to get 30 goals next year for all kinds of reasons. And so I think it's easier to make those decisions and trust people you've worked with in the past. It doesn't make it right or wrong. I think that there's a bit of both. But you see it a lot. Like, head coaches often work with at least one of the same assistants, job to job, because I think they need that sort of trusted ear. You see a lot of, front office people travel around, whether it's assistant GMs with GMs or top scouts, what have you. It's just kind of the way I think all business works. I mean, even when I look at my own career, I've worked with a lot of the same people at different places. Some of that is coincidence. Some of it isn't, like one of them just keeps hiring me at the same spot. But I think it's easier to work with people when you've got a bit of a track record in the past. And so that's why it keeps happening. And I don't see it changing, frankly.
Okay. That's going to do it for Ask CJ today. You did a great job, buddy, as usual.
Thanks, pal.
Be sure. But yeah, always like to give credit where
Let's have a great week.
Yeah, let's have a great week. Thank you to everyone who tapped in on today's episode. And we'll be back later this week with a brand new episode of The Chris Johnston Show. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. And we'll talk to you later this week. Peace.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Hey, did you like the thing you just watched?
Was it hilarious? Was it informative?
Was it me losing my mind?
Possibly. Potentially. Most of the time it is. Hey, listen, if you like what SDPN has to offer, you should check out more of our videos and subscribe to our channel by clicking subscribe, or Steve will find you.